Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Bank Marketing Show. We are glad to have you with us today. Dan, we're really excited about what we're doing today because it's a little different animal. We've got some, I guess, cool organicness about the show to share with folks, where we captured some really outstanding content in a conversation that we were having with one of our prior guests. And it just turned into something we wanted to share with everybody today.
Yeah, Hollie Brown, back from episode, was it 58?
I think it was 58, almost, yeah.
A year ago or so. I'll do a little intro for Hollie, but Hollie's VP of Marketing at Coastal Community Bank up in the Pacific Northwest. And they're a pretty big community bank, but also have a bank as a service. They do bank as a service for a few different fintechs as well. So they've got a bunch of different stuff going on. Hollie, if you go back and to listen to her episode, she runs a really great content strategy program for the bank, and not just producing blogs, but bringing in experts to write blogs that actually add value for their customers and things like that, more than just trying to get the clicks. And she does a lot of in-person events and stuff like that. So always great to talk to her. And yeah, Kristen, and you and I had a great meeting with her. She just reached out for some input on a project she's doing, and turned into this long conversation about the future of the cookie, the marketing cookie,
yeah,
and where that's going, how that's going to impact bankers and marketers in general, but bank marketers in particular. Wasn't intended to be an episode, but
no, we were so glad, and we kind of realized at the end of it too. You and I went, "Oh man, that was such good stuff." And then we were kind of like, "Oh wait, Hollie had been recording this for us," because she was going to utilize some of the content that we were talking about. And we were like, great. And we decided to share it with you guys in this episode.
Yeah. And it's funny, if you watch the YouTube, you're on YouTube, I'm pacing around at a car dealership waiting for my car to be fixed. So clearly super organic. We didn't intend for, didn't expect it to go where it did, but I think it's a great conversation. And even with that, my distracting pacing and stuff like that, still worth sharing. And I guess much else to say other than take a listen.
And I was going to say, and what we're sharing with you guys and what you're about to listen to, again, organically, but it turned into this conversation that was really applicable to, various asset sizes of community banks. And, this is really turned into more of a universal discussion around the impact of cookies and a cookieless future, quote unquote, and how that is going to impact, and what are workarounds or work-throughs or those types of things that we're all needing to consider and step into. So we want you guys, as our listeners, to check this out, give this a listen for this episode, and I think it's going to be of tremendous value for you and your marketing.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, I guess without further ado, here's the episode.
There you go. Enjoy.
What I've been looking at is all 50 Washington state banks, what cookie options they're offering. Is it they're offering to opt out completely? Or are they not offering it at all? Because some smaller ones don't. Maybe they're not required to. And with cookies, you're required to if you have California customers or EU customers. If you don't have either of those, which many Washington state banks don't, you don't have to have that little pop-up thing. But consumers can opt out through their browsers. There's how many browser options are there, so that you don't have cookies at all, or that your browser will give you that pop-up for that. So there's lots of ways to opt out. I haven't found solid data on how many people opt out of cookies, but I have found consistency that 20% of people just do. They always do. If there's pop-ups, 40% opt in naturally, but then there's that gray number. So if you are a FI marketer and you don't recognize that you're losing all of that traffic data because people have opted out, what are you going to do with that traffic data? It's similar to, because your website is like another branch. It's similar to having a branch and then 20% of the day your employees are going like this. And you have no idea who's coming in to your branch. You're not saying hi, you're not doing anything. And so my hypothesis is that many FI marketers are not aware of that missed opportunity or what to do. So obviously I'll provide solutions. But as you guys are working with people like me as agencies, tell me what your experience is working with bank marketing leaders or bank leaders, and if they address the cookieless future. Now, there was a period last year where we thought that Google cookies were going to go away. That's the last one standing, but they've decided not to do that. But there might be down the road with more privacy restrictions with the current administration that you'll have more control over your privacy. So tell me your thoughts.
I think the way I think about it broadly is that banks are either, it's like you mentioned that they might be unaware of that 20% of data they're missing out on, or they just might be kind of unaware of 100% of it. Like not a lot of, especially the smaller banks, just don't track anything. And, or the extent that they track is because they've got a Google Analytics tag on the site, and maybe if they're working with a agency, they're doing some retargeting of site visitors. But like I'd say I wouldn't be surprised if it's 75% of all community banks like do nothing. And I'm making that number up, but like it's you say cookieless future to most community banks, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
There's cookies in the break room.
Yeah. But the bigger ones, I think, I guess it's a small set, right? Most banks don't even know about this in the first place. And Google was around the time Google last year announced that they, were not getting rid of them.
Yeah.
And so nobody's sure what's going to happen anyway. So I think broadly speaking, like a lot of bank marketers aren't impacted. I work with a couple banks, a couple billion in size that, I don't know, I haven't felt the level of urgency about it. And I come from the world, like I started in advertising with a data tracking firm that heavily relied on the cookie existing for them to exist. So I get the space, and this. And when I looked at my LinkedIn network, and whenever there's an announcement, there's like it's an emergency of like, well, our businesses are gonna be crushed, and we've got to find other solutions. It doesn't really matter because we just do retard. So I think there's a big variance in how much you pay attention to it. I think for the vast majority of banks that are not super sophisticated, like there's other tools, there's webs, they think of it like there's website analytics, and we can kind of see what people are doing, and they don't quite get at like.
But only if they're opted in. You don't get the analytics if they've opted out. And you can't retarget to those people that have opted out.
Yeah. So I think the level I've seen banks be most concerned about is got to make sure we keep the pop-up up to date. Like it's more a compliance thing of what do we need to have on our site versus worrying about not having that data on everybody.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm not talking to enough $2, $3, $4 billion banks that have big marketing teams and would actually do something with that data. But that's kind of my sense is there's a select few banks that are concerned with it.
Chris, what about you? What's been your experience?
Well, I would echo Dan's sentiment. I wish I could put a hard number on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was north of 75%, particularly smaller, under $1 billion community banks that aren't even aware of it, or they look to us as the agency to, hey, that's the kind of stuff you guys are supposed to know and deal with, right? That's what we're paying you for, as an agency. So I would think that would largely be the case as well. I guess on the solution side of the question, then a lot of the discussions that we're having are probably two-part. It's kind of so what can we do about it if we're missing out on collecting even some of that data? 20% is an even interesting number, but because of the gray area you mentioned, it's probably well north of that as well. Yeah. So
probably 40% is my guess.
Yeah. Okay. So, it's there. I guess there are several ways to look at it. One is kind of like email marketing with an industry average of 17 to 20% open rates. You go, well, if we're emailing 10,000 people, then that's 2,000 that, that are opening our emails. Right. So that's great. So I guess that's kind of one of the perspectives about, well, if we've got people opting out of cookies and all of that, at least we're getting to the ones that are not opting out.
Right.
That's a double negative. But yes, so I guess that's one of the landscapes of thought.
To add to that, Chris, it's like it depends on your perspective of the website. Are you looking at your website, the behavior on the website to make design decisions about the website overall? Or are you looking at it individual by individual to personalize that specific customer's journey? And if you're a bank that's sophisticated enough to say, right, we've got a personalization tool, we want to make sure that, this customer was looking at a mortgage page last time, so that's the first box we're going to see. That 20% is a big deal. But if you're not that sophisticated and you're like, we're just looking at what pages people go to, then it doesn't really impact.
I also
or is it retargeting ads? Those types of things. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Dan. It's how much does that matter to you depends largely on what it is that you're trying to do. And Hollie, then I think the next set of solution discussions is, okay, let's assume that number is pretty big. I mean, if you say 40%, that's pretty significant. Then the discussions around, okay, well, what else can we do? Mm-hmm. And contextual strategies is probably a big part of the conversation and set of strategies that we're doing for a lot of bank clients, irregardless of the cookie issue.
Yeah.
Just because that can tend to work well and you're serving ads to key interested audiences. So looking at other strategies like contextual is a big way to do that. And then, discussions that we had with you way back, around loyalty programs, for example, those types of things that people are quote unquote opting in, even if it's that we're opting them in to reach them on other platforms, that it's not on Google, et cetera. It's not, maybe it puts them on an email list or heck, a direct mail list or whatever, So are we doing other things like a loyalty program or something like that, or I don't know, any other, number of things like that so that we're marketing to them, it's kind of like, how hard are we going to swim upriver?
Right.
Right. So if this cookieless future is a reality or again, are we going to just swim against the tide here? Or I guess as marketers, a lot of times my team's thought is, okay, you know what? How else can we market and just not fight against the tide so much?
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's two things. One of the pieces of data I saw was that the generation below me is Gen X, right? Is that what they are? Let's say the young people. They're more
Z
likely,
or X or something like that.
Yeah. So they're more likely to just be like, yeah, you can have my data. I don't care. They're more trusting. But as the generations are older, they're less trusting on giving their data. So community bank customers are that less trusting generation. So they're less likely to say yes to cookies. And that's a community bank traditional customer at this point. But then if you're a community bank or FI and you're going after that younger customer, you have the benefit of them more likely saying, yes, you can have my information. I trust you because I'm all over the internet anyway. It's fine. But another point is that if you're spending, let's say 10 grand a month on Google ads and they go to your site and you're not getting the traffic from 20+% of that ad spend, you're wasting money. That's a lot of money. And I don't think a lot of FIs know that.
I don't think they know that. I don't think they, I don't think they know that. Like the conversations I have around Google Ads, even with the sophisticated banks, are more about, are we getting ROI from our ad spend?
Right.
And, and then it doesn't ever get to that level of detail. I mean, that's part of that question, right? That's part of the ROI question, but it doesn't get to that level of detail. It's more of like, have we opened the accounts?
Right.
Are we running ads and getting account open? Where part of the answer to better ROI might be in visibility into that 20%, or get a first party data, a tool, so that maybe you don't know what somebody's doing across the internet. You don't have the third party cookies, but you you can track them when they come back to your own site, or focus on your logged in, your logged in users.
Yeah.
What are the online banking platforms doing once somebody authenticates? Because then you can track whatever you want.
I have a couple SEO friends, and to my knowledge and their knowledge, at least that they were aware of, there's no way to see how many people have opted out of your site, of the visitors. We don't have that data piece, right?
I don't think so. There may be some
so.
tools that try to approximate it, but yeah, because the cookies are on the customer browser.
Yeah.
And so it's really it's an individual browser sort of setting, even though it's a pop-up on the site. But I think there might be
browser and the site. You can opt out on many sites. On the bottom, it's got like that cookie thing, and you can say, I want to be opted out of this site. I don't know how many people use that. I can't seem to find data from the companies that provide that service, nor can I find data from the browsers on how many people opt out of cookies on the browsers.
Yeah, I wonder, I'm sure there's a tool out there. I haven't ever tried to look for one, but there's a way to track the button clicks, on that thing and report it back to the website owner. But I'm sure there's something that tracks it. I don't know.
I'm curious. And then I'm also in my analysis, I'm looking to see how many of these banks in Washington offer another opt-in option, like a newsletter or stuff like that. And very few do.
Yeah.
Very few. And the big banks, and so of course there's big banks in Washington, like some of them do have some robust newsletters, like JP Morgan on their commercial side has a nice newsletter with updates, but it's not easy to find. You have to go find it. It's not like if you're looking at commercial real estate or something like that, it's not telling you more insights or anything. You literally have to find it. Wells Fargo has some insights. Umpqua has a business barometer that's pretty cool. But as I go down in asset size, there's very few that offer opt-ins of value. Yeah.
The smaller banks don't have the resources. The smaller banks don't have the resources to do, I'll call them like ongoing marketing activities like that, like a quarterly news. Like the ones that do it are like, we do a quarterly newsletter that's like community events and, things like that. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then it's one thing where it's, as an agency owner, it's hard to sell a lot of that work because it's expensive for what it is, right? And it doesn't tie easily to ROI. But so the bank has to have the way that stuff works. You know this, but like the way that stuff works is like you build the newsletter list, but you got to make the newsletter of value.
Yep.
And the smaller banks are like, here's some community events, and here's people celebrating work anniversaries, and all that's fine. But there needs to also be that, like the articles like you write that are, here's how to actually solve a problem in your life. And then it becomes a lead magnet. But I think it's a level of effort thing, which I think is why the smaller ones don't do it. And I talk to my clients too. Like I have a bank in Western Iowa, and there was all kinds of tornadoes last year and, leveled half of a town, like a town of like 600 people, leveled a bunch of buildings. And that town was where the bank CEO grew up. And I was like, not to like capitalize on a crisis, but you have an opportunity, your bank, you're a community bank, and you have the opportunity to like be a source of information because there's not there's not a big newspaper. There's not coverage of this stuff. And there's not coverage of your CEO is out there shoveling and helping the town. And like, I was trying to convince them for a while on you create a newsletter, like, and it doesn't have to be just till this crisis is gone, but show all the stuff you're doing in the community, not in a sales way, but just as like a newspaper kind of way. But it's such a heavy lift.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you don't have a full marketing team, they just can't do it. So I guess back to cookies, like it's the biggest thing is we can tell what somebody's doing on your website, even without cookies, right? We can look at the analytics, we can track some of that stuff from session to session, but we just don't know what your other interests are. And so it impacts, I guess this goes back to like the article I was starting to write for the financial brand was like, it impacts what we know about our customers. With third-party cookies, somebody comes to the site and we can kind of see, they travel a lot. They buy a lot of, luxury goods or whatever, and that might help form our messaging and go out and target them. Without that, like we need to collect data from our, what becomes more important in the absence of the cookie is lookalike modeling. Like what can we know from the customers we can track, the people that log in, and how do we understand what they want, and then can we build a model to go out and find more of those people? It's not retargeting,
It's not.
It's patterns.
It's not.
It's patterns.
Yeah, it's not just behavioral targeting, but it's what do we know about our current customers and how can we go find more of them? Because even without cookies, there are plenty of digital targeting tools that can get pretty specific. I think that's part of the answer to the 20% is lookalike models and new ways of targeting. I think the other part of the answer is finding ways to collect more information. Like without the cookie, and I'm biased because that's what the startup I work for is trying to do in our agent is ask questions when somebody comes to the site. What are you looking for? What are your financial goals? Get into stuff like that. And then you can, if somebody's typing that in, you don't need the cookie. You can track it, and the agent can keep track of session, in between sessions. So it's there's tools like that. It's not just agents, but it's there's tools like that to kind of more directly collect information.
Yeah, you a few minutes ago, Dan, you mentioned first party. And that's what it was, and that shift.
It's right, collecting new first party data.
You got it. Yep.
One of my SEOs that I spoke to, he said that they have been very successful at lead gen for some of their credit unions, but the problem is they'll get the leads and then the credit unions don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
So that's also a thing too, is if you don't have a sales team or people trained on how to manage those leads, then all the efforts in the world are not going to help.
Yeah, I have seen that too. Well, we get the lead in, it kicks off an email, and it was well, when do you contact? And again, we'll get to them within a few days. I'm no, within 10 minutes. You need to be right away. And there's statistics that the conversion rates skyrocket if you contact right away.
Yeah, and so diminishing returns. That's right.
Yeah, and they actually but it was you're right. It was a whole process thing of, okay, well then that auto email needs to be routed to, a sales inbox, and the whole sales team has to be trained to watch it and immediately reach out. I'm that's what you need to be doing. It's like a phone call. Treat it like a phone call.
How do you think the fintech banks or the fintech companies are dealing with cookies or the cookieless future? How do you think that they're responding to this?
I don't know. I don't have any, firsthand data from it.
What's your guess?
My guess is a combination of tools, right? The fintechs are going to be better at, what I was just saying about collecting first party data and then using that to do lookalike modeling and go out and find people that way. I think they're just natively better at that than most banks. Their platforms are built with that stuff in mind. We've had from our digital agent tool, we've had a lot of fintech conversations about what are 80% of your calls to your call center, right? They all ask, what's your routing number?
Yeah.
They all ask the same 3 questions. And so the agent can do that, but along the way kind of engage and try to collect other information. And so it's more I think they're, if I had to guess, the fintechs are doing more like that, the more, I don't know, intelligent ways of data collection. What can we learn about you from how you navigate our site, especially once you log in, they're tracking everything. So they've got huge amounts of first party data versus the traditional bank where it's a Google Analytics tag and maybe a report from your online banking vendor once somebody logs in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and the online banking vendors are the majority of the online banking vendors are not any more sophisticated than the average bank in digital tracking. Right. Maybe you get to there's a few of the newer ones, but that are better at it. But as an example, I can't think of the name of it, but there's a few of the new digital online banking tools that have marketing functions like that built in. And I think that I think the fintechs are doing something similar to what those guys are doing. Of when somebody logs in, we're looking at their behavior. My startup is starting to get into the transactional level behavior of what do we know about your money in, money out, right? It's not about the balance in your account, but if you've got billions of dollars flowing in and out of your account each month, maybe the average balance is small, but that indicates something about your business and the other products you might be interested in. That type of stuff. So I think that's coming too, and that's going to be much more powerful than cookies as actual behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yep, agreed.
Chris, do you have any bank customers that are doing the opt-in newsletter process well?
Kind of like Dan, a couple of our clients that are 2, 3, 4 billion that have larger staff capabilities, a digital team, or are using part of my team as their digital team. So, really the ones that have the bandwidth and the budget for that are really the only ones that I see that are doing that, or doing it well, which leaves so many others that are, just don't have that bandwidth as part of their normal stream of marketing. Right. There's just no way for them to do that. And like Dan said, it's are you going to entice them with content of value and pain point resolution, rather than, Happy Valentine's Day and Betty Sue's been here for 50 years as a teller. That's great. That's neat. That's community. But that's not a strong motivator for an opt-in that takes an actual opt-in step, and knowing that I'm going to be emailed or whatever, texted, called, etc. It's only a select few is probably the short answer to the question.
And so would you say that as banking gets more difficult, do you feel that they're more competitive from a marketing standpoint because they are kind of dealing with that cookie issue as well?
Absolutely, no doubt that they are. Yeah. And what's going to happen is that rolls downhill, that eventually, the smaller ones are going to have to get better at, other forms of data capture and the first party stuff that Dan, was referring to, or alternatives for, doing that. It is interesting in kind of the overall scheme of what some of those are, is some of what I do see some of the smaller banks doing is trying to make sure that they have their physical addresses, and so that, they can, granted, statement mailers and those types of things have been on the way out for quite a while as well. But Dan and I were recording a new podcast episode yesterday for the Bank Marketing Show, and part of what we were looking at was newly released ABA data, and across platforms, and basically the growth of digital and the decline of traditional. But what was one piece that was really interesting for us was that something that still was holding its ground pretty high on the list was direct mail. Yeah. And so again, I keep going to our industry, everybody on this call, the marketing industry is not going to just go, oh, well, we're not getting cookies, so we're, what are we just going to go grab lunch? No, we're going to find other ways to do that. So yes, the larger budget FIs that are able to do that now they are getting ahead in the game. But it's going to roll downhill to where other ones are going to have to get better at that in order to continue to communicate well if they're going to be competitive. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think to the newsletter point, the fintechs, I would challenge you to find a fintech that doesn't have some kind of newsletter, some kind of regular email.
Some kind of opt-in, something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just because they're
I'll be doing an audit on fintechs too. You'll get to see it all. So you'll have all this information.
That's just they're native, they have to be native marketers. Mm-hmm. And, they're kind of half marketing, half bank, because I think they understand digital better. And they won't, the fintechs wouldn't exist without digital marketing.
Totally.
The banks can continue to exist for a while. It's become really hard to get new clients because they don't have digital marketing.
Yeah.
Or the best digital marketing. So but the fintechs know you could sign up for a bunch of fintech newsletters, and I think you'd find that they do a really good job at writing stuff that answers customer problems.
Mm-hmm.
In general, they're probably all writing the same stuff.
Yeah.
But they're talking about problems, not about work, employee anniversaries or, most community banks are like, yes, we will craft financial solutions for every customer and we help our community. But what does that really mean? And talk about write something that's an actual problem. And that's what the fintechs do really well. And I think that gets them the opt-ins, that gets them they are looking at the analytics of those newsletters as first party data to say, well, what gets good, what gets clicks, what are people reading, what are people spending time on? And that informs their the next marketing that they do. is, hey, whenever we write an article about first-time home buyers, it gets a ton of eyeballs. So we're going to write more of those.
And then you get to see who those eyeballs are, and you can retarget them. Yeah,
you're right. And through a newsletter too, you have the emails. You know who you can see which emails clicked on the article. Yeah. And then you can put them in a potential home buyer list, and then send more specific stuff to them. But that and that's pretty straightforward stuff.
Basic stuff.
Yeah, but most banks just aren't.
Well, the thing that kind of got me interested in taking like a normal thing into the banking world is I was studying like one of my favorite bloggers, social media bloggers from years ago. I was like, okay, what is she doing? Like, okay, I see you do this. So I was just like studying the mechanics of how she was so successful at building her social media lists and then also selling all her books and all that stuff. And I was like, why aren't banks doing this? Yeah. Why isn't FI doing this? And then I was like looking around. I'm like, every other industry does this except for banks struggle with it.
Yeah, a lot of them, Holly, don't. They think maybe that's a compliance issue,
right?
So it's that and compliance has to enter into the discussion there because compliance raises a fear factor. Mm-hmm. And again, the maybe larger or more advanced teams are probably going to have a compliance officer or office that is going to have a better understanding.
Yeah.
Of that, rather than the smaller ones that from a fear factor are going to go, nope, we're not even going to try that.
Yeah.
That could possibly
for sure
maybe get close to thin ice, so we're not going to do that. And we do. I mean, I know my team sees a lot of that.
Yeah.
But we suggest some of those other strategies, and they're like, oh gosh, oh no, our compliance said we can't do that, and we're like, oh, actually, you certainly can.
Yeah.
We're way in bounds here. No, well.
It's different. Different is scary. Different for bank, but every other industry does this.
Yeah.
Every other industry. Your tire shop, like I mean, your car company. I'm sure you're on an email list telling you.
There's automated appointment confirmations and follow-ups and surveys and
And we're the only industry that struggles in it. But I think you're right, Chris. The compliance part is part of it.
I make a service appointment, and then in a week I'm going to get hey, we want to buy your car, and it goes over to the sales team, and that just doesn't that cross.
If you have a car loan 6 months before that loan comes due, they're like, hey, maybe you're ready to upgrade. Check out our new models. I mean, it's a process that's tried and true.
Well, and a lot of that is good utilization of CRMs and those types of things that, again, some bank lenders are doing okay at. And all of that. But, you start talking about even good utilization of the data that you do have in CRMs and those types of things that can do that so well for you in the kind of system like Dan was just describing that we're all very familiar with. But some of these banks are like, so tell me about your CRMs. Like, yeah, it's called Excel, and we kind of put stuff in it sometimes.
Or Libra, if they're cheap.
Yeah.
Every year we print a list of customers we need to contact, and then we just highlight them and call the list. Okay.
Yeah. There you go.
How much do you think, because my experience as a bank marketer is that leaders at banks are financial people, and they're not marketing minds. Absolutely. And so doing that story or the selling current marketing trends and models to financial leaders is very difficult. How would you suggest a bank marketer be like, look, this is what we need to do? How would you suggest, how have you won in that area?
The proof of life is probably the best way to describe that, is by case study. If you can show, you can't promise ROI, but if you can show, others that are like them saying, look, this other 700 million asset bank over here did this, this, and this, and here were their either a complete ROI picture, or at least they raised more engagement, by doing these other things. To me, Holly, yes, it can be kind of it's the leaders are financial minded and they're not marketers. But if you can show, I'll say this carefully, implied return
Sure. Yeah.
or legit ROI,
Yeah.
then you really get their attention, very quickly. So I think that's the only answer to that question, because if you start explaining complexities, and alternative metrics, you go, hey, we can do these contextual strategies rather than this, and you lost them.
Yeah, you got 10
because
minutes.
Of what you said. Yeah.
100%. I'd say I try to use a lot of data and statistics to convince an exec, because that's bankers will understand numbers. And if you say, at one point in a year or two ago, I was thinking of commissioning a research study that showed, right, let's get the FDIC data and let's pull a list of all the banks that have grown in the last year, look at the top 10% of them, and then do some analysis on like what's their marketing, and how does that compare to the banks that are not growing,
right?
And show that to, because that's something they can understand, right? Chris, to your point, like it's not. Yeah. You need to be doing contextual, but it's saying these banks the 10% of banks that are growing the most have invested, $100,000 a year into their brand or into digital marketing, and they've grown. And, and I think that's what the leadership needs to see.
Yeah, they need to see how they're stacking up to their peers. I know a lot of banks are like, well, what are other banks doing? And I'm like, but a lot of other banks aren't doing anything in our size.
Right. What other banks are doing is not the model. It's what the growing banks are doing. It's what the fintechs are doing from a marketing standpoint. Because like you made a good point of the people that run community banks are not marketers, but the people that run fintechs kind of maybe not are marketers, but they have everything is tied to digital marketing with the fintechs. So they have a mind for it and they understand the importance of it natively. And so you don't have to convince them, know?
Because community banks have, a lot of their investment is the people on the street selling. Fintechs don't have that at all, but they're growing faster than community banks are.
Yeah.
Like they can get deposits faster. Their spend on marketing is probably less than all the bodies of the salespeople that community banks are paying. So if you think of a community bank that has 40 commercial lenders and that also has, let's say, 60 bankers that are salespeople, if you took that amount of money and put it into marketing or products and services, what would that look like?
Yeah.
I'm not a proponent of laying people off.
The marketing that works the best today is the stuff that speaks to niche problems, and the fintechs are mostly niche. Yeah. Most of them start with a very, very slim niche, and they get a foothold and they expand from there. And so, like by the time they're super successful, they don't look like niche providers anymore.
Right.
But they started that way, and they start because they start that way. They're like, well, a community bank says we want everybody in this community to be our customer, so we have solutions for everybody. A fintech looks and says we want these 1,000 people. And we are going to bend over backwards to, solve all of the problems for those 1,000 people. And once we get 500 of them, we'll pick the next 1,000 people. And we expand from there. But when you do that, you can get so focused on your message and so focused on, is it a newsletter, right? Is it a text message?
That's a good point.
Somebody stopping by your house and they, you get to know that customer base so well that you solve all their problems. And it's a strategy of like, and then for that customer, for those 1,000 people, if you're looking at that fintech versus a community bank, like this community bank doesn't know me, they just have a checking account. And ultimately what you're buying at the fintech is a checking account.
Yeah.
but gets you your paycheck 2 days earlier or something. And that solves a massive life problem for you. And you create like a loyal customer. So, and I think that's it. Just community banks can't niche market like that because they'd have to target 30 different niches.
Right.
And so a lot of like when I do a marketing strategy project at the bank, it's that's all it is like, who do you serve uniquely well, right? Who do you serve better than your competitor? Because there's usually some customer group. And so then picking the top 2 or 3 customer groups like that, and like that's your marketing strategy, is reaching those people. And you're not alienating others, you're not turning away business. But let's get really good at reaching those 2 or 3 people, and then we can pick 2 or 3 more. And I think that's that's the inherent problem. And I mean, back to the cookie. I don't know that the cookie doesn't have much of an impact on that. If the banks are not recognizing why they're being beat by the fintechs.
Right.
So Yeah.
Well, and Hollie, also that the community banks are so limiting or limited by nature.
For sure.
So here are our 7 branches. So we're going to run digital ads within 20 miles of each of those branches, and our people are boots on the ground in each of those communities and all of that. So, by that definition, their entire audience is whatever.
Geographical.
250,000 people or whatever it is. Well, whereas a fintech, to your point, Dan, is the net is cast so wide for a fintech to try to capture those 1,000 customers. They're gonna market to 2 million, like that.
Yeah.
And less expensively, like you said, because it's not human capital, it's digital capital, so it's way cheaper. So much by net and higher population numbers, just by your targeting numbers. Yeah.
Another point too on that difference is like the fintechs, they're funded, right? So they're setting the $100 million funding round, and they're going to blast most of that into marketing.
Many of them don't survive, so there's that.
Well,
too.
but they, when they get funded, the mentality is we got to spend this money. They're not sitting on it like a bank does, and so it's we've got $100 million of Series C funding, and we got to get it out there. We're going to drop 20 million on marketing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm making this up, but we're going to drop a huge chunk on marketing.
You're accurate. Yeah. Per quarter, 2 million per quarter for some of them. Yeah.
Even a $3-4 billion bank is that marketing. I'm sure you live this, but you're fighting for that budget every year, and you might be fighting for a couple $100,000.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
That just isn't going to stack up. Isn't going to stack up against the fintech budgets. Yeah. Well, I worked with a bank last year that in 2023 they had a $450,000 total marketing budget, and then they had a bad quarter at the end of 2023, and then it got cut to $300K for 2024, and then by March they had laid off 2 or 3 people and stopped working with us because the budget got cut to $50,000.
Yeah,
you're like a $1.5 billion bank. If you don't, cut back some stuff, but if you're not marketing at all, you're just you're going to your own demise.
Yep.
But anyway, it's a mentality up against a different mentality, and so the fintechs are going to adapt to the cookieless stuff or any other regulatory changes, and we're going to see a lot of those the next couple of years with AI and
the unfair thing for those for cookies. If you have let's say you have 60% of your cookie traffic with the current core systems that are older and harder to update compared to fintech systems, we can't. I've worked at 2 banks now. I can tell you, I got people to the website. Let's say I can track 60% of them. I get them to open an account button. I cannot say if they open an account, what that account balance was, what the ROI is. I can only say I got them to open a button.
Yeah,
so I can't prove that the money I'm spending is effective because I don't have the full.
Yep,
that's right.
Journey.
We ran a marketing, an email campaign. We just focused on email for it. Email campaign to open up CDs, and it drove a bunch of CD deposits. But we tracked it for 3 months after the campaign, and still looked at those customers and said, okay, maybe you didn't open a CD during the campaign, but did you come in a month later?
Right.
And now we're working on one for money market accounts and things like that. And so we're targeting people, high net worth people, and then we'll follow them. Right? Great, you opened an account and put $50 in it because we made you. But what did you do 90 days later? What did you do 180 days later? Are we becoming your PFI? And so, I think there are tools coming that will do that. That will connect. If you can track somebody clicks on an ad, comes to your site, opens an account, right, and then look back 6 months later and say, well, who from everybody that came in from an ad, what is the total deposit balance? That type of stuff. I think we'll get there, but it's going to be a fintech that creates that tool and makes it a plug-in to Jack Henry or something like that.
Fintechs can do that. They absolutely can do that. They have better data to analyze what's working and what's not working, and their ROI on their spend and their activities.
And they're more nimble.
We're just I don't want to sit and complain about it.
I think we'll get there, but it's I still think it'll be the same problem of the fintechs will know that stuff. and even further be able to refine their marketing spend. And the majority of traditional banks are still going to be in the same problem of I spent 20 grand on Google and it didn't work, So
yeah. Hollie, we had a client of ours that last month we were meeting with them and running some various digital ad campaigns and created 271 conversions. Okay. On their, and this was click to call, this was this or that, but what we were trying to track was applying online. So there were like, whatever there was, 30 something, of those. So we're like, so what happened once they crossed the threshold? And as you say, their core system is antiquated, not able to track that, all of that. So we're trying to track the whole process and tie ROI to it. And they're going, well, I don't know. And, once you're on the core side, where did we lose them?
Yeah.
Did they partially fill out a form? Did they do any of those things? And, when you step out of what community banks can do competitively with digital advertising, cookieless or not, and can do that. But then once you cross over that fence, then, and, like you said, if it's, created a list of email addresses, are we emailing to them?
Mm-hmm.
If it created call, where our lenders calling them back, as Dan said, like within 15 minutes, like now. Yeah. Or if they're applying online or if they're converting to an online application form, and if we sent 39 and you got 2, okay, well, it's a very simple question. Where did that break down? Right. And their antiquated core systems are going, yeah, we can't track that. Right. Did you get a partial fill on a form? Did you, are the forms too complicated? Or is it, there are all these reasons why even those conversions are not, converting all the way to ROI, and why that and sometimes as marketers, we can't answer those questions.
And you can't fix it either.
So we're going, we're driving traffic.
I brought them to
putting
the party.
People in the lobby.
You got to make the party go. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah. It's like we're putting butts in the seats, but they don't know anything about the hamburger you're feeding them.
My kids have this catchphrase lately that sounds like an ish you, not an ish me. And that's kind of what that is. It's like, hey, we're driving the horse to the water, but you got to make it drink. Like
But the fintechs have that advantage because they can do it. Yeah.
Well, they built the platform from the ground up to handle that funnel.
Yeah.
And
like every other industry.
We're retrofitting it. Yeah.
So I appreciate your guys' time today. This has been a super fun conversation. Did this conversation make you think any differently about cookies?
It did for me. It did. I think as marketers and as an agency, we just go. And we, if one paddle breaks as you're rowing down the river, just grab another paddle and let's go.
Yeah, for sure.
So yes, I think it made me, consider a little more. It's like, if that's significant of a portion of data and data pathways are, really an issue, then how are we going to surmount that challenge? So it made me want to turn around and talk to my team about it more too. Yes.
Oh, good.
I've been thinking as we're talking here about just that divide between fintechs and banks. Like the marketing divide of skill divide, and I just that's what I just realized through this conversation was like, the cookie thing is going to make that even bigger. The AI thing is going to make that even bigger and make that gap even bigger. So.
Well, this is great. No, I feel like Dan and I got to be on the Hollie Brown podcast today. It was really cool. Yeah.
Actually, we should just turn this recording into a bonus podcast episode or something.
Okay, Dan, I swear I thought about that. I was like, I might have to ask Hollie if we can have this recording.
You're welcome to.
Except I've just been pacing outside here, so I don't know what.
No, you're welcome to
Dan, it would be an organic one, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Real life. We were so passionate about this. We had to talk.
Well, thank you, Dan. I hope you get your car fixed today, whatever's going on, and that you'll get an automated email when you're done saying thank you for your service. Give me a survey and tell us how we did. Yeah. And Chris, I really appreciate you joining as well too. I know it's nice to hear that you have some customers that are doing the opt-ins, and because that's one of my solutions I'm providing in addition to other softwares. What do they do? Like, yes, they're not staying competitive, but what do they do to stay competitive? And
There you
those
go.
are nice solutions.
Absolutely. Well, look, if either of us can help you any further with this, let me know. But yes, would love to have your information going forward and your report and what you have. It's good juicy stuff.
Yeah, it's due in like 2.5 months, so it's not far out. So I'll certainly share it with you.
Well, good. Well, we enjoyed being on the Hollie Brown podcast very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I hope you have a good rest of your day and good weekend.
Thanks. You too.
Let's stay in touch. Thanks, Hollie.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, I hope you, if you're watching on YouTube, hope you enjoyed me pacing around. I'm happy to be inside and warm again. But great conversation.
And it looked cold too. You were out in the snow.
Yeah.
But you were fully engaged in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation. If you're thinking about this stuff too, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear your take or help provide some feedback or input on anything you're working on. Reach out to us at contact@bankmarketingshow.com.
Yep. And we'll have show notes in the links and on the website too at bankmarketingshow.com. So thanks for hanging with us. Hope that was really resourceful and helpful to you guys. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Yep. Thanks all.
All right.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.